ここはどこでしょう。どうも、
Joseph,
水耕で
you
す。
can't go to sleep feeling like this. I'm sorry for everything, and I know you need space, but I'm here for you. You don't need to feel so lost. Joseph, have I ever told you what my mother was like?
Rachel.
Hello, my name is Elise Whaley, and I was the voice actress for Rachel. I'm also David's wife, so that was convenient for working together. I was actually the voice actress for his first game, Home is Where One Starts, and I guess that I did a good enough job that David wanted me back, so I did the voice acting for this one as well. David definitely coached me through it because I'm pretty inexperienced when it comes to that. Home is Where One Starts was my first time ever doing voice acting of any kind. And we watched a lot of trailers of movies we liked to get the voice right of female leads who were talking in the trailer and try to mimic that and bring that into the game. So that had the right kind of feel and the right kind of atmosphere for the voice. My character actually is the same character from Home is Where One Starts. If you've played that game, you probably connected that together. And this is her probably about 15 years later, maybe 20 years later, in this game. I was happy to revisit the character of Rachel. We kind of leave her in an ambiguous spot in Home is Where One Starts. It definitely ends on a hopeful note, but there's not a lot of details. And in this game, you see that she's able to move on through a lot of her issues that she had from her abusive home and be able to start her own family and start a new cycle without that abuse, which I think is really inspiring.
なるほど。初めての声優さんだったんですかね。おや、彼は小鹿でしょうか。小鹿が走って行ってしまいました。
You know what it's like not to have a mom at home. And you know how hard that made my childhood. What helped me was watching the birds in the morning before the school bus came. I thought that my mother was one of those birds, and it made me want to be free like her. My mom taught me how to fold origami cranes while she was in the hospital. So I told myself I would fold one every day until I could fly myself.
お母さんを早くに亡くしてしまったんですかね、レイチェルさん。おや。
I think we both have always loved animals, and for me that love started with a dog. Sometimes this Rottweiler would come up to our property line and wait at the fence for me, but only once in a while. I was sure to check every day immediately after school, and it usually ended in disappointment. I would even steal money from my passed out dad just so I could buy these off-brand dog biscuits. Even when she did stop by, she never went beyond the fence. Why was she so scared?
ああ、いいっす。ワンちゃんか。皆さんは動物は好きですか？私は半々。
So it's always interesting working with your spouse because, especially on a creative project, because they want your feedback, but it's something that's also dear to their heart, and they're dear to your heart, and you definitely don't want to hurt their feelings. So I was a little nervous when David asked me, he had finally finished writing the script, and he asked me to go over it and see what I thought. And I had minored in English. I majored in art, but I minored in English, so I felt like I had a little bit of experience. But I was definitely like a little scared because you don't want to be too harsh, but you also want to be honest. And it was the biggest relief when I read the script, and I was like, oh good, my husband's a good writer. I don't have to change that much about this, just a few like grammatical things. And that was just like the biggest relief for me because it can be a tricky balance working with your spouse and making sure that that honesty is there, but also that love and the support is there as well.
この絵を全て英語で原稿を書くってのも大変ですよね。なかなか苦労したらしいですよ。
I think my dad was the
Probably.
opposite of your dad in almost every way, except he was in the military as well. He coped with alcohol of every kind. The trailer started falling apart, he got angry, and I withdrew. More and more, I became the weird, quiet kid who made lots of origami birds and carried dog biscuits around. I think we were pretty similar when it came to being the weird kids. And that same sincerity in college was one of the reasons I was so drawn to you.
母親が亡くなって叫びたりな父。お家は相当大変だったんでしょうね。おや、エンディングが近いかな。音がすごい。大丈夫？眠気飛んでない？
Life got worse and worse. And at one point, I really didn't think I could survive another day with my soul still intact. I had no real friends, let alone neighbors, since we lived in the middle of nowhere. I should have talked to my teacher, but I was scared what he would do if he found out. As I waited for the school bus one morning, I walked around until I found something in an abandoned shed. Something I can't put into words.
小屋の中で印刷されたてか描かれた何かを見つけた。これのことですかね。生命の木に似ているようですが、ちょっと違うような。
So we're talking about home is where one starts a lot. So if you haven't played that game, maybe this doesn't make as much sense, or maybe this is a little plug that you should go play it. But in that game, it actually features one of my artworks. I work as an artist and paper cutting, actually. And David used one of my artworks as a graffitied stencil in Home is Where One Starts that's against the wall of this shack. And it actually shows up again in the first tree, just a fragment of it. The first tree, the title actually comes from one of my artworks that I made back in 2015, I want to say. And I made this artwork while I was pregnant with our first child. And it had a lot of meaning for me, and David actually helped me come up with the title. And he asked, because I was really struggling, I was like, I have no idea what to call this, and I always go to David for title ideas and to bounce ideas off of him, and that's like the only way I can ever come up with a title is by talking with him. So we were talking back and forth and looking at this artwork, and he said, well, what kind of like movies or shows were you watching while you're making the artwork? Because my work's pretty tedious, so sometimes I'll watch a show or do some Netflix binging while I'm creating it. And I was like, oh, I actually watched Tree of Life a ton. And then we're like, Tree of Life. And we started thinking more about that and then arrived at the first tree. So it started off as one of my artworks and then became a part of David's art, which I think is really cool that we were able to share that title.
なんて言ったのかアメリカ語は難しいですね。わかりませんでした。
I summoned courage I didn't know I had, and I broke into my dad's room and found the key to the shed where he had locked my bike. I'll never forget that feeling, the wind rushing by my ears as the sun rose over fields of wheat. I was flying for the first time. I biked as far as my legs could take me until I found a house that felt friendly, and that felt like home. Those strangers helped me in so many ways. And if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have found my foster family. And if it wasn't for my parents, I wouldn't have met you.
なるほど、里親ですか。本当の家族といるのが幸せだという人もいますが、本当にそうだとは限らない。そんな人たちもいるんですよね。本当の親から離れてきた人たち。でもあなたが信じる親にあなたは感謝を伝えられていますか？
You have strength, Joseph, and you're not as alone as you think.
It's all just so pointless. Just waiting for life to happen. It's like having the home I always wanted is cursed out of my reach. The thought of being a parent myself. How could I do that when I couldn't even be a good son? I'm sorry. I know what you're saying. I just don't know how things will work out. these quiet hours will turn into years. We'll wonder which roads passed us by.
Then we'll forge a new road together. Besides, I discovered for myself that one fateful morning where any hopeful road leads to. There may be thorns and mist, but it always leads to the same thing.
And what's that?
Family.
I'm so glad that you're part of my family, Rachel.
And I'm glad you're part of mine.
話やな。
A question I get a lot is why a fox? And it ties into just how important family is for me. And Fox is actually a family name from my wife's side, from Elise. And she always heard about the legacy of the Fox family. And because of that, growing up, it was her favorite animal. She even made these 2 wooden foxes for our wedding cake toppers. So I thought it would be cool to have that animal in the game while these 2 people are having this conversation in the middle of the night.
ウェディングケーキの上に狐2匹か。面白いですね。そんなケーキも作ったんですかね。お幸せに。将来、未来というのは分かりませんが、あなたの未来にはどんな光景が待ってるんでしょうね。もちろん私の未来にも何が待ってるのかなんて全然わからないんですけど、これ命がたくさんある。こんにちは。おじかさん、こじかさん。私は先に行きますね。逃げなくていいですよ。私は悪い狐じゃないので。おや、あれは何ですか？あんな崖ギリギリにある光なんて気になっちゃいません？ああ、でも残念。見えたと思ったものは近づきすぎると見えなくなっちゃいました。誰の声でしょうね。さあ、人生、自分がいい子供じゃなかった。だからこれから先ね、いい父親になれるのかわからないみたいな話になっていたような気がしますが、あなたはどんな子供でした？そしてどんな大人になろうとしていますか？私はそうですね。優しい人になりたい。そう思いますね。辛い時、悲しい時、いろんなことはあると思いますが、主人公と同じくあなたは一人じゃありませんよ。してたまにはね、また私の動画に会いに来てください。またお話ししましょう。さて、行ける道は一つしかない。いや、本当はあるのかもしれない。けれども今は気づかないふりをしましょう。今は前に進みたい気分なんです。もっと前に進んで、もっと先を見てみたい。そう思うのはきっと悪いことじゃないですよね。さて、壁です。高い壁です。 でも登る術を知っていれば、どんな高い壁でも乗り越えられるってもんですよねえ。あなたも高い壁乗り越えてきたんじゃないですか。中にはくぐり抜けてきたなんてモーさんもいるかもしれませんけど、どちらでもいいんですよ。進むべき道は一つですからね。私たちが進むべき場所は結局のところ私たちで決めていいんですからね。ああ、悲しい。
Fox knew her last cub would be waiting for her at the
悲
first
しい音
tree.
楽だ。
She was almost there. The rain cascaded onto the Jade Valley where the entrance to the tree was. Life was protected there, because that's where life began. It was now only a mother and a daughter left. Items from my life still dotted the ground as she moved closer to her destination and destiny.
落ちてしまいました。目の前がこんなに深い谷になってるなんて、まさしくどん底ってやつですね。でもどん底に行ったらあとは簡単ですよ。だって一本道しかないですもん。駆け抜けるしかないじゃないですかね。さあ、やることは決まりました。行きましょう。どん底の私にできることはただ前を見て突き進むだけ。よいしょ。時々壁を登ろうとチャレンジしてみて、やっぱり難しいななんて感じてみるのも面白いかも。壁は高いほど登りがいがあるらしいですよ。でもどん底は逆に何もなくて少しすがすがしいまでもあるからね。よし。さあ飛ぼう。
Usually what catches people's attention of the first tree is the visuals, of course. And I was inspired by a lot of people making these levels. The second level is inspired by just these beautiful autumn photos of a real forest. And this level, the Jade Valley, is inspired by the artwork of Heather Penn, who did the Overland games. I just love those greens with a lot of gray in it. I love the strong vignettes in the corners of the frame. And of course, this environment pack was made by the very talented Swedish designer Mikael Gustafsson. And of course, his initial designs inspired me, and I was able to build off of that. And I'm really grateful that he allowed his environment pack to be made publicly available.
ああ、この美しい色合いにも意味があったんですかね。頑張って作ってくださってありがとうございます。
I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Drive. I looked into the best architecture schools on the West Coast, then got a dose of reality when looking at other students' portfolios and the high cost of tuition. I still wanted to be something, to be the next Alvaro Siza, and to make those thousands of sketches worth something in my grand history. But now even an internship sounds impossible. Siza helped me understand how essential emotion is in architecture. And he also said light is the real composer of space. I like to think these glints of light, like not finding a job or even a strange dream about a fox are something I should be thankful for, even if the illuminated space is something I'm less than comfortable with.
そうですね、光に照らされた場所が自分にとって幸せな場所とは限らないってのは分かりますよね。分かりますよねっていう同意を求めるのはちょっと卑怯でしょうか。輝ける場所がその人にとって本当の幸せな場所とは限りませんし、かといってどうなんでしょう。その光る場所を追い求めて走ってきたけれども、また違う明るい道に出てしまったなんてことになったらそれはそれで大変なのかもね。その時あなたはどうします？自分が本来望んでいた場所とは違う場所で成功を収めてしまった。あなたは望んでいた道を諦めるんでしょうか？それともまた新たに追い続けるのでしょうか？私には分かりませんが、きっとどれもどちらを選んだとしても幸せにはなれない気がしますけどね。どうなんでしょう。おや、見えます。あんなとこに家が見えますね。あそこが終着点でしょうか。The first tree.
By now, you've probably caught on to some of the themes I love to explore in these stories. And the big one is of this tree, the first tree on Earth. And a lot of people have asked me, what does that mean? Why a tree? And basically, it boils down to this delicate balance between nature and its relationship with life and death. And I love these stories where they put like these microscopic relationships, like something of like a father and a son, and juxtapose it next to this epic story of like the creation of the universe and the first tree on Earth, and how they can be equally as important, because in my mind, like, my family is as important as like the creation of the Earth. And it reminds me of like some of the stories I love, like The Road by Cormac McCarthy, or The Tree of Life by Terrence Malick. Basically, I wanted to make sure the player felt that there was a higher power than themselves, and that there was something watching over them as they went through this story.
こちらが正義だったかな。このゲームは、生と死の間についてであったりだとか、自然についての話、そして父親と息子といった世代間をモチーフにした、お話なんですよみたいなことを言っていたような、言っていなかったような。これはバーベキュー？違うよね。なんだろう。何かの壊れたパーツ。お肉みたいに見えるけど違った。よいしょ。皆さんも何かの間で悩んでたりするんですかね。いわゆるそれをジレンマとか葛藤とか呼ばれたりするものでもあるんですが、まあ人ですからね。一つ二つ三つ四つ悩みぐらいあるでしょう。おや、こちらにも光がある。あれは物語の光だな。さて、冷たい冷たい場所をひたすら走っていきますよ。さて、到着。
My dad was super supportive with my college plans. To a point. Things were okay until this terrible accident happened. I guess a forklift flipped over due to a bad axle, and it crushed one of the workers there. My dad didn't eat for days, even though he wasn't directly involved. It devastated him. Not only did it hurt the business, but it just freaked him out. He would talk in his sleep, muttering things about firing people and saying sorry. One fateful day he approached me, Said that since my school search wasn't going well, I should finally be a man and take over the family business. He said one day he was going to die, and that all of his work, sacrifice, and even that man's life would be wasted in vain. I just lost it. Teenage me just exploded at the thought. I screwed up. I said things I shouldn't have. He was having a crisis, and I pretty much spit in his face.
父親との反抗で思いも思わないことまで言ってしまった。でも父親は相当苦しんでいるってことは今になってようやく分かったという感じなんですね。よいしょ。あなたはそうですね、こういう言い方は卑怯でしょうが、親御さんが苦しんでいるとき力になってあげていますか？私はどうなんでしょう。慣れているのでしょうか。親不幸者にならないように気をつけないといけないかもですね。さて、じゃあ行きますか。高いけど、よいしょ。さあかけよう。目的の場所が見つかったんだ。まっすぐ行こうじゃない。お家の人が何かしらの家業をやっていて、それを継がないかと言われたとき、どうするのが正解なんでしょうね。それが親御さんの善意であるならば、下手に突っぱねるのも良くないし、そしてもともと自分がその気であるなら何の問題もないんですよね。ただそれが自分の願いと相反するものだったとき、その時どうするのが正解なんでしょうか。まずはしっかりと話し合うことから始めていきましょうね。あなたは最近親御さんと話してます？私はぼちぼちですね。さて、そういえばあなたはどうして私の動画を見てくれているのですか？私の実況が好きだから？それともなんとなくこのゲームが面白そうだから結末が気になるからって方もいるかもしれませんね。でもどうでしょう、もうそろそろ眠くなってきたんじゃないですか。無理せずお休みくださいね。雲があまりないのに雨がたくさん降ってますね。皆さんは雨は好きですか？私は好きですよ。この雨音、とっても眠たくなりますよね。あくびが出てしまいます。よいしょ。おっとっと。この光は集めていくと何かあったりするのかな。あなたはどう思います？エンディング分岐あったりするかな。でもインディーゲームですよねなんて思っちゃうのは私だけでしょうか。
Was that the last time you talked to him?
No, I called on holidays, and he would call on my birthday. I guess we acted like nothing ever happened, which was stupid. Didn't want to ask about his lumberyard, and I'm sure he didn't want to ask about my job search. I never went back and visited. I think the last conversation we had was about what movies we had seen and what exactly a best boy is in the credits. I thought he would be here so much longer.
父親が 長生きすると思っていた。まだ生きると思っていた。それは親を亡くした人なら当然思う気持ちなのかもしれません。でもどこかで心の準備ができていたりするのかもしれませんね。
In the distance, the first tree illuminated the wasteland. She couldn't go home anymore. She did the only thing she was capable of. Moving forward. My dad died alone in the middle of the wilderness. I should have been talking to him more. I should have done a lot of things differently.
If the first tree on earth brought life with it, if it taught the birds to sing and fly and showed saplings how to grow, what could it do for us?
この覚悟はできていましたね。でも実際の自分の親、自分の子だったらどうなのでしょう。
Obviously, there's a really emotional part, but I'm going to talk through it anyway. A lot of people correctly identify that Journey was like a huge inspiration for the first tree. And this part, it is like a callback to that part where you're climbing up the mountain with your friend you don't know, and it just gets snowier and snowier, and you just keep going, and then eventually you collapse. And that part, that made a huge impact on me. And I don't even own a PlayStation 3 or 4. I rented a PlayStation from like a rent-a-center right after completing Home is Where One Starts, just because I'd heard so much about it. And everyone was right, it was a very impactful game, and it definitely inspired the first tree.
ええ、このゲームは有名なゲームではないけれども、あなた方が前に進み続ける、そんな気持ちになってくれたらみたいなことを言っていたような、言っていなかったような。最初の日、その最初の日が何かしら救いを生み出してくれるというのであれば、何を願うのでしょう。もし自らの親が、子が、知り合いが命を失ったとして、私たちにできることは何なのでしょうね。きっと Keep going。 ええ、進み続けることしか私たちにはできないですよね。
There was a letter I received yesterday from a name I didn't recognize, with a quote I can't stop thinking about. Death is not the opposite of life, but a part of it. More and more, I'm realizing one important truth. Each of us have our own journey to the first tree, but sometimes I'm not sure I'm ready to take that first step.
You already have my love.
ええ、あなたは今一歩一歩自分が死に近づいていっているのを感じているでしょうか。もちろん私も今この瞬間も死に近づいていっています。ここでいいの？ダメだよね。どこを進んでいったらいいのでしょう。あの木の元へ進めばいいのでしょうけど、一体どこがその木への入り口なんでしょうね。ああ、なるほど。死は生の一部である。それは確かに事実ですね。あなたが生きる中でたくさんの死と出会ってきたんじゃないですか。 そしてこれからも様々な死と出会っていくんじゃないですかね。そしてその死というのは周りの誰かのこともそうですが、自分のことでもある。じゃあ死ぬ覚悟ができているかと言われるとどうです？私はまだないです。でもいいこともあるんですよ。私実況者なんです。この動画は YouTube を通して世界中にアップロードされています。だからもし私が今日または明日死んでも、あなたは私に会えますよ。私の思いに触れることができますよ。ええ。でもまだ生きていたいなと思うのは人の差がってやつでしょうか。始まりの日に到着しました。最初の木は目を覚まし、子供たちにいつだけ伝えたいメッセージがあるかを狐に尋ねる。狐はこう答える。あなたの答えをここに入力してください。子供たちに伝えたいメッセージがあるか。もし私が子供に伝えたいメッセージがあるならば、幸せに生きろ。いやー、陳腐なのかな。それよりも自分らしくあれ。私はそれだけを願います。前に進みなさい。110文字なんていらないですよ。本当に伝えたいことはすごく
I guess her journey was over,
シンプルなんですよ。
but I have no idea. It was only a dream, a distraction from tomorrow.
I don't think dreams normally bring back to memory so many important feelings. Maybe it was just a dream, but it was also a gift.
Yeah, I suppose. But tomorrow we're getting on a plane to the last place on Earth I want to be. The only person that would have made the trip worth it is gone.
You're going to see him and be with him one last time before you say goodbye. I have one last quote for you by Emerson, sealed in an imaginary letter from me to you. It is the secret of the world that all things subsist and do not die, but only retire a little from sight and afterward return again. Go to sleep, my love. We have a big day tomorrow, but I'll be there with you every step of the way.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Good night, Rachel.
Good night, Joseph.
おや、夢か。レイチェルが寝ている。さて、こっからは人のよう人らしく生きてみますか。ここはアラスカの地ですかね。それにしてもバッグを持ってきたばかり、この場所に着いてきた、到着したばかりといったところでしょうか。本も何もかもがボロボロだ。唯一布団だけが大きいかな。調べることもできないね。おっと、What's up？ 新居ですかね。段ボールがいっぱいだ。
You're probably thinking, what is going on? And that was definitely my intention for this epilogue part of the first tree. This is my favorite part. This is the part I'm most proud of. And it definitely, like, it's supposed to evoke this, like, what is going on? Where am I? I was not expecting this. When I was marketing and blogging about making the game, I never showed anyone this part. I never told anyone. I never shared screenshots. I wanted it to be a complete surprise. And I also wanted it to feel a little creepy because it's totally inspired by those nights where you wake up in the middle of the night and you can just hear the sounds of the wind outside the house and you can't sleep. So you walk around in this like twilight stupor. And I would say the whole first part of this game where you play as the fox, its whole purpose is to set up for this conclusion. So yeah, I would encourage you to look around and see how many things you recognize from the earlier part of the game.
いわゆるおまけパートになるんですね。倉庫みたいな場所もある。いや、裏口か。さて、今はこれはいわゆるアメリカ式のお家っていう感じなんですね。オーブンの横にこれ洗濯機がありますよ。洗濯機なのかな、本当に。へえ。やっぱユニットバスってお風呂とトイレが一緒にあるんですね。日本人からすると、私はそういった作りあんまり好きじゃないんですけど、唯一ホテルとかであるぐらいですよね。皆さんのお家別々ですよね。でもアパート暮らしの学生さんとかなら一緒なのかもしれませんね。ああ、私こういう場所好きよ。皆さんは自然がいっぱいな場所どうですか？好きですか？虫が多くて嫌っていう人もいるかもしれませんが、ここアラスカなんで多分虫いないですよ。あ、フォーミュラードリーム。
I tried hard to foreshadow this epilogue just because I wanted it to be a surprise, but I didn't want it to feel too out of place that it would be humorous. And so Joseph, earlier in the game, he would say things like, I felt like I was right behind the fox the whole time. In my mind, the camera perspective acts as a metaphor for who the player is, what they're seeing, if the camera represents Joseph, or just like that video game trope of having the camera follow you. I guess the big question I wanted the player to ask themselves, is this a dream as well? And if so, does that even matter?
このフォックスというゲームを子供とできたらいいなみたいなことを言っていたような言っていなかったような。皆さんはゲーム好きなんですよね。どうです？自分の子供たちと一緒にやってみたいななんて思うことはありますか？私はありますね。むしろ今でも時々子供と一緒に遊ぶこともありますね。だけどたまにはいや、たまにというか大人になったからこそ一人でゲームをしたくなる、そんな時もあったりするんですよ。こういうゲームなんて明らかにお一人様用ですからね。一人用プレイゲーム、子供と一緒に遊ぶなんてとんでもない。ああ、高い山々に囲まれた本当に人がいなさそうなそんな場所。 皆さんはこんな場所どうです？好きです？私は大好きです。こういった山に登ることっていうのはなかなかないんですけど、こういう場所一度は行ってみたことがありますね。私も山登り自体の経験はあんまりないのですが、私が学生の頃に一度だけ行ったことがあるかな。皆さんは山登りとか好きです？ああ、キャンプの後ブロック塀で作った焚き火台というかやつですかね。水筒らしきものと、スコップが置いてあります。ベンチもある。おや、何か光ってますね。ホタルか。おお、完全にシェルターだ。おお、中に入れた。ラジオがあって、寝袋があって。
What the hell?
お、なんか光ってるのがいますよ。眩しいですね。強力なスポットライトより眩しい。そんな感じがします。待って、あの走り方はキツネさんですか？何かに導かれるようにいや、導かれているんでしょうけど。
I purposefully fade out the crosshair in the middle of the screen because I wanted it to be a direct callback to the camera following the fox in the first 5 levels of the first tree. I wanted it to go for that gut reaction that this was very familiar yet totally in a different world.
ああ、ごめんなさい。キツネさん追うのに一生懸命で聞いてませんでした。日が昇りましたね。とても綺麗です。雨か。こんなに雨は降らなさそうな天気なのに。待って。何かを見失わないように走り続ける。あなたはそんな経験ありますか？それは自分にとって大切なものなのかもしれないし、はたまた誰かにとって大切なものかもしれません。そんな何かの逃がしてはいけないと感じるほどの大切なもの、皆さんにはありますか？ないっていう人もいるかもしれませんが、もしかしたら意外と近くにあるのかも。自分の心の中にあるのかもなんてね。私にとって大事なことは何でしょう。私は子供たちに残すのは自分らしくあれと残します。だからこそ私も自分らしくあることをやめずにいたいですね。願わくばですが。
thank you for making it to the end of my game. And I hope you enjoy the personalized message that is featured on the trunk of this tree. It's a message submitted by another player that's retrieved from a database, and it's retrieved at random. And I did this because I wanted people, even if they feel alone through trials of death, that there is a community, an invisible community supporting each other. So thanks for playing.
ゲームが終わるとき、物悲しさを感じるのは私だけではないでしょう、きっと。私はいつもあなたのそばにいるよ。あなたを愛してる。ええ、それが彼の言葉なんですね。皆さんは死というものが近づいてきたとき、どんな言葉を残しますか？私はそうですね。もう語り尽くしちゃいました。なんてのは嘘です。語り尽くせないです。もっと話したいことがある。そう思ってしまいます。でも、そうですね。きっと私は幸せですよ。ええ、あなたと出会えて。さて、では物語はおしまいです。可能であれば英語を利用してくださいっていうことを言われてますね。オンラインデータベースにコメントを提出すると他のプレイヤーに見ることができますので、それをね、できたら残してくれると嬉しいなっていうのが最後の、作者からの言葉にあったようななかったようなデータベースに残すのであれば残しましょう。私がプレイした記録を。でも日本語にしちゃいましたけどね。さて、では、このゲームザ・ファースト3の実況はおしまいになります。ここまで付き合ってくださってありがとうございます。そして良い夢をご覧ください。じゃあバイバイ。